Thank you for joining me today, Jim. Jim Mullen, President, TCA. I wanted to talk about the proposal for comprehensive reforms for the FMCSA. It's a comprehensive document, 27 pages from top to bottom. Let's start out, Jim, the why. What did you see as the need, TCA sees the need for these reforms with FMCSA?
Yeah, so thanks for having me.
Oh, excellent.
Pleasure chatting with you as always. The need really is to properly staff and resource the FMCSA so that they can effectively and efficiently satisfy their statutory mission to improve highway safety and reduce accidents involving commercial motor vehicles, trucks, and buses. We've seen a lot over the last, but certainly the last 3 years plus, where there's been a lot of abuse in the system. And then fairness, like the truck driving schools, and we'll get to that. I mean, that's been, the mills, those have been going on for decades, right? Doug, you know that. And so when I hear Administrator Bars talking about all the things that he's trying to accomplish and having been in that role for a while, two things kind of run through my mind, Doug. One is, add a kid, go get them, right? Yeah. And then secondly is, how in the world are you going to get all that done with the resources that you have? And so this proposal in part is dedicated towards how Congress can modernize the FMCSA such that the FMCSA has sufficient resources to fulfill their statutory mission. And I got to tell you, Doug, I've kind of fallen into the social media trap where I read more on social media than I probably ought to. And there are a lot of good ideas that I read about how to improve FMCSA's performance and the industry writ large. But I know for a fact they don't have the ability to do all that. Right. And so this is the way for stakeholders to understand that the FMCSA needs these resources to really do the things that we, by and large, all want them to do. And so the TCA decided, we'll pick up the mantle here, and we'll get this ball rolling. But I also want to say right at the forefront, this is not a TCA go it alone initiative. We have wide support from the ATA supportive, Tank Truck Carriers supportive, TIA supportive, IANA supportive, MFTA supportive, and the state executive, TAEC, they're supportive. So this is something that is going to take, basically. Oh, and I always forget the name of John Lannon's group. John Lannon, John's a safety advocate in DC. I always forget the name of his group, but they're supportive. So it's not just trucking, it's right. So it's sure. Wide. Absolutely. So that's the why. That's the why.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think you started off with one of the key points that you have to increase funding and increase personnel staffing on it to achieve these large bites that Chief Barr rightfully wants to get done, and I know he is looking at a finite period of time that he has to do it with a large mission. With regard to being able to do that, Jim, I see some of the numbers, and often the FMCSA talks about the relationship of what they have personnel-wise versus the FAA. In terms of what they're doing. Given the manpower and that, I think that's probably the predicate to getting a lot of the rest of this done then, right?
Oh, for sure. And we are even more specific than just manpower. The investigators is really where they need to beef up their resources.
Yeah.
So they have, as far as the safety investigators go, they have about 300 or so now. We think that needs to be tripled to get 900. And then there's some other areas that require some increases on the investigator side and safety related support personnel. So really, we think they're at about 6. If you look at the whole gamut of the different jobs, if you will, job descriptions, that the current number is about 600. We think it needs to be about 1,300 plus. And so that's a huge number. And by the way, you referenced FAA. For every employee at FAA, there's 38 regulated entities.
Right.
For every employee at FMCSA, it's 7,150. Right. So the numbers, right, and it's not apples to apples, but
no,
it should at least raise some eyebrows. And so that's the resource wise, the head count, so to speak. And our proposal lists different ways of you can fund that. We weren't proscriptive in that, all has to come from the highway trust fund or all, but there are some user fees that we
Sure.
propose to help fund some of these things, the pre-entered vetting, the operational vetting, those types of things. So there are some user fees that we think would be appropriate. And by the way, we haven't had any backlash from anybody, any of the stakeholders on those increased user fees. So yeah, we focus predominantly on the investigator job description. And I do want to say, and you're right. I mean, Bars himself probably has what 2 years left now to get some things done. But we looked at this, and you'll notice we don't have a whole lot of quote policy provisions. So
Right.
we think this is durable. We think that whether you're a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, what we're proposing it really is agnostic,
Yeah.
and it's just fulfill the statutory mission properly. That's it. That's really about it. We did have some suggestions on how to go about doing some of those things, but whether it's Bars or who knows, who controls the White House, come 28, we think that what we're proposing, it really is, it's agnostic, it's bipartisan. And by the way, the meetings we've had on the Hill, with on the, we've met with appropriators on both sides of the Hill. We've met with Commerce on the Senate side, T&I on the House side. Um, we've gotten some very positive support,
Excellent.
and both from
Yeah.
Republicans and the Democrats. So it's both
Yeah.
sides. But
Yeah. Yeah. And, in today's fractured world, at least people can get together because the bottom line, Jim, of what you're doing is to improve safety and save lives on
yeah,
this.
that's all it is. I mean, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And I guess I also should have prefaced with this. This is in no way, shape, or form criticism of the current
No.
FMCSA or even past FMCSA. It's
Yeah.
not. It is entirely give them the tools to properly do their job. And I'll give you an example. Folks, will say this particular administration, the motor carrier enforcement activity has gone down, which it has, but their activity on the ELD certification or decertification, the entry level driver training certification and decertification, that's where they've allocated a lot of the resources of those investigators because they have to run the whole gamut of the portfolio. So in some respects, it's that the classic whack-a-mole game
Sure.
where Administrator Barrs and his team that, oh, we really got to make sure that we're stopping this abuse, bam. And then, but so what we're doing is it's not whack-a-mole anymore. You're keeping all the moles below the ground.
Yep.
And so that's really our thought process behind it. And just kind of in general terms, so we approach it from pre-operational vetting.
Right.
Then while you have motor carriers and we have suggestions on how to identify high-risk motor carriers, and we can talk about that. And then the things that you talk about, like decertification of ELDs, ELDTs, medical certificate process. So it's really the entire gamut of I'd say probably close to 80% of FMCSA's portfolio.
Sure. And if I recall correctly, Jim, though some of the increased personnel you're looking at are to address those decertification issues with regard to ELDs, ELDTs, et cetera, on there so that they are staffed in addition to the investigators that are out there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think it seems
Yeah.
TCA certainly is fully supportive of decertifying, I'm sorry, of eliminating the self-certification on those three
Right.
things, ELDs, ELDTs,
Right.
and the medical certificate. And whenever I hear the administrator talk about their plan to decertify, hey, applause, but now what?
Yeah.
Now what, right?
Yeah.
And so the now what is you need the resources, the personnel to be able to do it in-house. And that's going to take some subject matter expertise that they don't have today. So yeah, that's kind of the whole, not again the impetus, but they know what they need to do by and large, and they in fact can get it done, but they can't get it all done with the
Right.
resources they have. Now again,
Absolutely.
being repetitive, it's whack-a-mole.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, let's start with you talked about the entry provisions into the carriers who want to come into the industry. You've got a number of proposals there in terms of what to do to make that not just a revolving door, but to put some checks on it going in there.
Yeah, yeah. And first and foremost, and I know that the modus system, I mean, you need to have a uniform registration process,
Right.
and a single process. So they're working on that, and that, as you know, they were going to eliminate the MC number, and that's not on track, and that's okay. But again, resources is somewhat of the problem. But having a uniform single source for registration, as you know, now if you pay your $300 and fill out the paperwork properly, and you say you're was it fit and able?
Yeah.
Fit and
Boom.
able? Yeah, yeah.
I'm in.
Boom. You're obvious, right? That's right. Yeah, and you have a truck. You're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get after it. We think there needs to be some pre-operational vetting. I mean, it just
Absolutely.
seems almost absurd. And
Oh,
yeah, right.
yeah.
And by the way, I mean, we're not trying to. Well, this is not a capacity issue, Doug. This is
Right.
a safety issue. So we're
Sure.
not trying to prevent folks from entering the marketplace without stricter barriers. Yes, we are, in that they're all safety related. All safety related. So increase the agency's authority as it relates to the pre-vetting process. Now they have zero statutory authority to say no to somebody that applies for a DOT number if they do the application process properly and they pay the money. So that's step one. It needs to be on site. You need to be able to verify the physical address, location. The new entrance safety audit. As you know, it's 12 to 18 months. It states, and I was at TA. Well, I saw you speak, and you did a fine job at TAEC, by the way. But one of the state execs sent me a text. I think it was from the 80s, that talked about how the feds were giving up the jurisdictional authority of that new entrance safety audit. So it's been going on for 40 years, right? Even under the federal highways, right?
I got the same text.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, Colson is thorough, right? So they need to reform that new entrant process,
Right.
And there are suggestions on how to go about doing that. Give them the authority to say no, give them the authority to suspend authority if they're not doing what they need to be doing properly. So that, and you've heard Administrator Barter's talk a bunch as well. He talks about keeping the bad actors, out of the front door. Don't let them in, and that's what this does. This is entirely focused on that part is keeping the bad actors out. And I would say bad. Even well-intended people, if they don't have the resources and don't know what they're doing, make sure that they do have the resources and they do know what they're doing.
Exactly.
So it's not just bad actors.
Yeah. Yeah. As opposed to what other industry or what other regulated industry would say, you need to be certified, but I'll tell you what, go ahead for 12 to 18 months while we see what your qualifications are on it. And you're right. It's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just to require the qualified, limited to the qualified folks to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember at TAC, they talked about barbers and beauticians. I mean, those folks have to go through a more, more demanding vetting process than you do to operate an 8,000-pound truck. And that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've had CSA now, for 16 years from the old 2010. The proposal there is to redo the system, Jim, that you have.
Yeah. I mean, couple things about that, right? And you've been around this business longer than I have. The CSA 2010 was intended to be a internal system to identify high risk carriers, right?
Right.
And I think that the folks that devised the system at the time at FMCSA, I think they maybe, without regulatory design, they wanted it to be a little more than just an internal high risk identifier. I think they wanted it to incentivize or spur greater emphasis on safety, which isn't a bad goal.
Sure.
But it had some unintended consequences that we've all been dealing with for the last 16 years, right? I mean, every organization and their brother has done some sort of study on the efficacy of it, and And there's been some positive support for it, but let's be honest, a lot of it has been, hey, it needs to be improved. Um, and by the way, they're operating off of dated data, right? I mean, they're
Yep.
looking at stuff that could be months and months old, stale. So our proposal talks about a continuous data-driven fitness framework. I know they've been looking at, but so I think if you build the internal resources, the data-driven resources, which by the way, the private sector, as you know, has a lot of tools that they are using
Exactly.
and selling. And I do know that the FMCSA and the Secretary's Office of the DOT are using some of those private vendors to kind of look and see how they could help the organization. So I'm not even saying that they need a homegrown all this stuff. It doesn't need to
Right.
be organic. They can use existing resources. Um, but but bring those resources to bear so you have more reliable
Mhm.
real-time data. And then if you have more reliable real-time data and you have the sufficient investigators and resources to actually to do enforcement and to investigate folks that hit that high risk category under the new system, then you have a meaningful system to make sure that the folks that are not meeting the safety requirements or safety performance, you can work with them, they can improve. And if folks don't improve, then you get them on the system like you should. And so if you have a robust system to identify high risk carriers, reliable data, real-time data, take away some of the flaws that you have with the CSA basics and the bias of and the discrepancy between where you are geographically and all those other things. Look, in my perfect world, Doug,
Yeah.
if you had these tools and pre-operational vetting, ongoing vetting through this more robust identifier of high risk carriers, then you can have a meaningful safety fitness determination. Then it's
Exactly.
meaningful.
Yeah.
And then not that this was the goal. In fact, this was all done, I think, before Montgomery came out, of course, the decision
Yeah.
on Booker. But it does make things easier for the entire
Sure.
industry. If and again, not bad mouthing what FMCSA has to date. Like anything else, I get a little and maybe it's personal me, Doug. So like what the ELD's requirement, that was already baked in. So I started FMCSA as chief counsel in 2018. So it hadn't gone into effect yet, but it is already baked. And as you know, they allowed for not allowed, it was
Mhm.
self-certification process. And what I think the mentality of the FMCSA staff when they allowed for that, when they promulgated that rule, they kind of looked at NHTSA and the OEM self-certification,
Sure.
right, with the cars
Mhm.
and trucks. Now, I think they thought that the folks in the ELD business would be as diligent and safety conscious as the folks in the OEM business. Well, it didn't turn out that way, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah.
and so in retrospect, it's easy to say, "Hey, yeah, you really screwed that up." But in your law practice and
Yep.
trucking companies, businesses, if you go down a path and it's not the right path, you just fix it and you move on.
It
That's all. That's
evolves.
all we got to do. That's all it does. It
Yeah.
evolves. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So whether it's ELD self-certification, ELDT self-certification, and that's another thing. The ELD before
Yeah.
ELDTs, there was zero. I
There's
mean,
nothing.
zero management.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a wild, wild west, and then some. And so now the agency thought that by having just the regulatory system, albeit self-certification, that you would drive out some of the bad actors, and you probably did, but certainly there's still a lot of them in the industry. And so you just fix it, Doug. You just fix it.
Yeah.
And to fix it, you need resources. So
Absolutely.
so that's the safety fitness determination. And at the end of the game,
Mhm.
it would in my mind, uh then you just throw the CSA in the trash. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, you don't need
And
it anymore.
and I think, Jim, as you recall, the FMCSA has been looking for an alternative to that. Probably for the last 7, 8 years, they looked at the scientific approach to it. They proposed the binary approach within a couple years ago.
Yep.
So yeah, and I think my understanding is the same, that they're looking out to the private sector to try to apply what they resources they have out there to come up with an
Yeah.
alternative. So
Which I think is it's a
yeah.
great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we talked a little bit now about the self-certification, the proposals to take those away, including the medical exam
Yeah.
self-certifications as well from the
Yep.
physicians on that.
Yeah. 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 And there's the kind of the soup du jour is the foreign involvement. and that's good and fine. There is a lot of
Yeah.
on the ELDs and the LDTs, but it's not just foreign involvement. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of, of domestic abuse as well. And I mean the fact that what's the latest total, Doug? You know, on how many truck driving ELDTs they decertify? It's like 4 or 5,000, right? Some
I think
crazy
it
number.
is. Yeah. And the problem I understand, Jim, is that these are all basically like a platform.
Yeah,
So that as soon as it's like, I remember drug enforcement used to have trouble with bath salts at a gas station. They would come up with a regulation to get rid of that combination of things, and they've shifted a little bit and go around the back end then.
that's right.
And,
Yeah,
and I think that's what they're doing with the ELDs now too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And this again, it's safety, not capacity, but this is a good example, or not a good example. It hones in on the extent of the abuse. I read something that the CEO of Warner Enterprises, Derek Leathers,
Mhm.
he opined, and he may have had some data behind it, I don't know, but because of the ELD abuse, you have, let's say you have 10 trucks that are abusing, they're manipulating
Right.
ELDs and they're running hot, so to speak. He said, so you have these 10 trucks, they're running like 15 trucks,
Right.
right? And so
Yeah.
if you take out those 10, you really take out the capacity of 15. And again, capacity is not the play here, but that's a lot of there's a lot of trucks out there running
Yeah.
well, non-compliant, and um, completely agree with the administrator. You have to decertify, but again, get back to the now what,
Yeah.
and so
Exactly.
they need the resources to implement that process. On the entry level driver training process, I've heard the administrator talk about like starting from scratch, like decertifying or taking away all their credentials.
Yeah.
I don't know, I get it, but boy, oh boy, that would be quite a process. So I think they're on the
Yeah.
track of just weeding out the bad actors that they have now and getting away from self-certification. But blowing the whole thing up,
Yeah.
that has some collateral damage implications, I think.
Jim, I've been thinking the same thing. It's like, okay, I agree on eliminating decertification, but particularly ELDs. How do we get the genie back in the bottle
Yeah.
at this point? So,
That's right.
but
That's right.
yeah, one of the things I thought particularly interesting and a great move is making the clearinghouse not just for the CDL drivers, but for the other drivers, non-CDL or the other truck drivers. I'm trying to think of the wording here as I flounder, but to check for other commercial drivers
Yeah.
on that as well. Because we got right now, the last I saw, and I think it's only out as to December, we have a fifth of a million, 200,000 who haven't gone back through the SAP program.
Yeah.
And my guess is they're driving somewhere.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Probably so. Yeah. It's probably not a 26,000 pound truck, but they're driving somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably, maybe they are. But yeah, the, and that's been an ongoing problem with the credentialing with the states, and in fairness to them, sometimes they don't have the resources to properly manage the
Right.
process as well. And one of the things that talking of the credentialing, um, sure would be nice, not only nice, it'd be great for safety if there was the real-time notification pushed to the
Oh,
employer if the
yeah.
driver's credentials are revoked or suspended by a state. There's been talk about doing that for a long time. That's not in place, and our proposal certainly recommends that. And then one last kind of proposal, the of the $1 billion that the FMCSA gets from Congress, these are rough numbers, about
Right.
600 million of which
Sure.
or so goes out. The vast majority of that 600 million is formula funds under the MixApp
Yeah.
program. Yeah, there are statutory parameters, but there needs to be more metric-based provisions that the FMCSA can utilize to hold the states accountable, right?
Right.
And by the way, that again, that's not a red state, blue state thing for me. I mean, when you talk about
No.
non-domiciled, sure, California was not doing it appropriately. Texas was just as had the same numbers, and just fix it. That's all
Yeah.
it is. But
Yeah.
to modernize the mix-up process such that the states are held accountable for how they spend that money to make sure that you're getting the return on the safety investment that the feds are tending to get. And so there needs to be some modernization of those metrics as well.
Jim, much pushback in terms of, yeah, this is good for safety, save lives, but gee, it's more government.
Um, kind
Hopefully
of,
not.
not
Yeah,
really, not
good, good.
really.
Yeah,
Uh, I have gotten a little bit of, you know, if there's a change in administration, change of administrator, change
yeah,
of policies, could it be used as could be problematic? I don't think so. I really don't.
yeah.
And the other thing behind this is um, so it needs to be again sustainable, right? And 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 so that's why we didn't get into some of the policy provisions, right? I mean,
Right.
it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
not. I mean, TAC has a great. You know what I know. Their
Hmm.
resurgency proposal, ATA,
Yeah.
TCA. We're all working on issue by issue things. And we didn't want to get in kind of bogged down on that. We just said, hey, FMCSA has a statutory mission. I mean, they've been
Right.
mandated by Congress to do X, Y, and Z. I'm just telling you they can't do X, Y, and Z because they
Yeah.
don't have the resources.
Yeah.
So um, we were fully focused on just appropriate resources so they can
Absolutely.
fulfill their mission. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're proposing and asking for the resources to do is universally agreed to.
Yeah.
Like you said, across the board of all trucking. How often do you ever see the administrator walk into a room and get a standing ovation before he
Yeah.
talks? Yeah.
Well, I wish I could say I did, but I didn't. So
But
yeah,
I think,
yeah, that's um, you know, there are times when there's the right person and the right job at the right
yeah,
time. And Derek Bars is the right person in the right position at the right time. His law enforcement experience, his network and relationship with state law enforcement, state DOTs, and but it's CVSA. I mean, he is the right person to rise to the challenge of fixing the things that need to be fixed. Um, when that's in part why we're doing it. We need to do our part. We as industry stakeholders, we need to do our part to make sure that team, that agency has the tools they need to do their jobs.
and he's got the perfect agenda. I think everybody's in agreement that we need to deal with the bad actors on this. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And by yes, yes, and you touched on this at
yeah,
when you spoke at TAC. We all know the industry, everybody in the industry knows the vast majority of the whether it's the carriers, whether it's the drivers,
yeah,
they do the right thing day in and day
yeah,
out. They're
absolutely.
motivated by safety. Safety is a core value for them. And it's the folks that don't do it right, whether because
Yeah.
they're cutting corners intentionally, abusive, or they're not well educated to do it properly. We fix those problems and
Oh,
our whole entire industry image goes up
uh,
tremendously. And we all know that industry image is something we battle with, not only just in lawsuits, but just kind of across the board. And I remember when I was an acting administrator and COVID hit, and the president of the United States is giving speeches on the West Lawn talking about thank God for truckers, and people are putting up banners over bypasses.
absolutely.
That was only 5.5 years ago.
Sure.
And where'd everybody's
Yeah.
memory go? And
Yeah.
because our industry it's a tremendous industry, it provides a tremendous service to our country, and the vast majority of folks do it right. And our proposal, we think, helps gives the government the tools to make sure that the bad actors aren't let in the front door and get the bad actors out once they are operational. So we are very appreciative of all support and opportunities like you provided me,
Yeah.
Doug, to talk about it and get our word out. We're very appreciative for that type of support.
Great proposal, Jim. Whatever we can do, let us know because I think it's very necessary and it fits in with a lot of efforts that are going on right now.
For sure. For sure. Yep. Yep.
Jim Mullen, thank you very much.
Doug, appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.